Prologue. Chapter 0. A Letter Home. Dear Mother and Grandmother, how are you doing? I hope you are both well. Summer has ended, so it must be nearly time for the chilly autumn wind to start blowing. Please take care not to catch a cold. I'm doing fine, but please forgive me for not being able to write any details, not even the current date or location. I've told you this before, but it's regulation. Don't be alarmed, but the list of things we can't put in these letters was updated again just the other day. We can't say what type of bread we ate. We can't say what type of meat, be it beef, pork, chicken, mutton, etc., that we ate. We can't say the exact date we received your letters, either. There are so many restrictions, it's hard to keep them all straight. I can say that I miss your apple pie, Grandma. But if I say whether or not I've eaten apple pie here, it would be deemed leaking military secrets or something. I'm trying to be careful as I write, but it's possible that part of it will be blacked out by the censors. Still, nothing major has happened here, so please don't you worry about me. Honestly, it's frustrating to not be able to say what I'd like to. Right now, my unit is training and getting reorganized. That much, my superior officer, who informed me I'm not allowed to share their name, said I could write, so no worries. We don't know where we'll be deployed next, so I don't have much to say. With love from a base in a location I can't disclose, sincerely yours, Mary Sue. Chapter 1. Rapid Advance. We begin here with a quote. On the whole, the situation in the East is good. A quote from the Imperial Army General Staff Monthly Report. August 28th. Unified Year 1926. Eastern Front First Class Car. From the southern continent to a long-range reconnaissance mission in Federation territory. At the conclusion of that journey, there was a direct attack on Moscova, and right when I thought I would get to head up to the rear, I was transferred to participate in an air battle west of the Rhine front. The moment I figured things would settle down a bit, I was ordered to form a Kampfgruppe. After following orders that yanked me all over the place, south, east, west, I ended up joining the battle in the east. We were given the supporting role of escorting the main forces on their advance. But as we were gradually pushed farther east into Federation territory, my Kampfgruppe received yet another new order. So, we're being reassigned, eh? That's right, Colonel von Degrichoff. It's a shame we have to lose you and your Salamander Kampfgruppe so soon, but we can't keep you when you belong to the General Staff. A high-ranking officer in the Eastern Army Group informed me with a resigned, them's-the-breaks smile that we were suddenly being sent elsewhere. Well, reassignment orders are almost always sudden to the people on the ground. But Tanya sensed something slightly strange this time. Sorry you have to keep moving around like this, but do your best. The comments she got from the Eastern Army Group staffers with a pat on the back were decisive. They were heartfelt words of consolidation and consolation about Tanya and her unit's transfer. Frankly, that's not the kind of thing said by staff officers who just had troops suddenly pulled from their lines. A Kampfgruppe reporting directly to the General Staff getting pulled out is simply the result of a properly functioning Imperial Army. No one can object to it. Moving its own unit from the A lines to the B lines is the General Staff's prerogative. But if you think about it this way, everything makes sense. It's simple to understand if you imagine us as a skilled anesthesiologist. The General Staff is a university hospital that dispatched there as anesthesiologist upon the request of a private hospital, which would be the Eastern Army Group. If the university announced to the impoverished, understaffed regional hospital that it was pulling out its anesthesiologist, it would be weird not to encounter some protest, right? Surely. And yet, the officers here were calmly passing on the orders without any fuss? That had to mean they had known about this for quite some time, and kept me in the dark. The only one who didn't seem to realize was me. It's probably correct to suspect that I was being informed at the last possible minute. I was rushed through the handoff, and yes, indeed, there was time for a handoff, so there was definitely some advanced consideration that went into this plan. And before I knew it, I was rocking along on some train. The efficiency of all the arrangements makes Tanya sick. These reassignment orders came down without any delays or other trouble. No missed messages. But despite all the preparations, it should probably be said, the reality of it being a reassignment from the front lines can't be ignored. For example, thinks Tanya with a sigh, as she looks around the first-class train car. The train ticket certainly says first class, quote-unquote, but this is a passenger car of an armored train on a military-use line for delivering supplies and personnel to the front. First class, quote-unquote, means you are lucky enough to have a seat. Considering the supply line situation, it could be considered surprising that the higher-ups even allowed for a first-class train car. Granted, the facilities available for travelers on board are scanty nonetheless. It's something else entirely from a first-class car back home. At the end of August, with summer ending and autumn about to begin, the temperature in the Federation is cool enough that the lack of air conditioning is tolerable. Still, though they call this a sleeping car, the only furnishings included in the sparse compartment are a wooden bench to lie down on and a sturdy desk. And the bench is so small that if you weren't short like me, it would be quite a tight fit. If I were home in the Reich, I would have sworn at them. Do you think you're transporting cattle? Really, it's hard to deny the possibility that some planners may very well have requisitioned an actual livestock transport car. In any case, calling it first class is utterly absurd. At the same time, even with all those faults, there is a truth that mustn't be overlooked. One of our trains is up and running incredibly close to the front lines. Our forces must have performed quick maintenance work on the rails in occupied enemy territory, evidence that both the Service Corps and the Railroad Department are doing their best. You could say it's possible to catch a glimpse of the supply situation on this trip. Though it might not be related, a good example of this is how the food tastes relatively good. When a sandwich on bread that wasn't stale and coffee were served for lunch, Tanya was elated to an embarrassing degree. And surprisingly, a newspaper was provided after the meal. When Tanya looks at the date, don't be alarmed, it reads August 28th. In other words, it's today's paper. It may be afternoon now, but it's possible to have the morning's paper delivered to the forwardmost positions. That in itself speaks volumes to the determination of the Imperial Service Corps in fighting the logistics battle. On the other hand, Tanya has a mind to complain as she grumbles to herself. I get that this is wartime coverage, but what garbage! Saving paper and keeping military secrets are important, granted, but the newspapers in the rear are a bit too far removed from the real world for her liking. What appears to be reader reactions to the ridiculously titled column, quote, "Life of the Brave Soldiers on the Front Lines," end quote, in particular makes Tanya crack up. As usual, it's too censored and too full of propaganda. I can't help but think it would be better to tell the home front what it's actually like on the front lines. This drivel they call patriotic sentiments in the form of letters from school children. What bollocks! The fact that they have so many writing in, well, it's probably not a bad way to boost fighting spirit. But apparently, school children these days know all the abbreviations and slang that the troops are using on the front lines. Their knowledge is comprehensive enough that I want to burst out laughing as I read. You're going to post reactions to this fake news? Okay then. The more I read, the more suspect it seems. It's like they're not even trying to hide the fact that only one person wrote them all. It's obvious when a bunch of boys and girls use the exact same phrasing. The most telling part, though, is that the openings have long since been written according to a template. This is an awfully careless way to fight an information war. The Federation and Commonwealth are probably better at this sort of thing than us. Well, I guess there's no good way to beat liars at their own game, Tanya thinks, sipping coffee from the military-use pseudo-mug and sighs. It's good that the Imperial Army is aware of how important information warfare is. But if the method they choose lacks sophistication, it'll only backfire in the long run. Sheesh. Having time on your hands is poison for someone who lives to work. It's not strange that Tanya's complaining. Seeing other people's sloppy work is bizarrely irritating. Looking out the window with nothing to do, she sees a vast wasteland. It's currently the tail end of August. The sun is shining gently, leaving the weather too comfortable to associate the east with mud. But Tanya doesn't attempt to hide her annoyance with the massive expanse of land that seems to go on forever, even when viewed through her binoculars. For crying out loud, if we try to take this huge swath of land, the army will be spent. Despite massing the majority of our forces on this front, we don't have the manpower to cover it all. This is like dashing into a tunnel without knowing if there is an exit or not. Having thought that far, Lieutenant Colonel Tanya von Degrichoff smiles wryly, though it's out of character for her. I guess the view out of a train window invites people to think in an unusual, meandering way. Still, Tanya ends up pondering a certain point regardless. There's been a thought smoldering inside of her for a while now. In the history books of Earth that I know, the German army was fated to melt away on the Eastern Front. The reason was simple. They took too many losses at each position along their overstretched lines. That war of attrition proved fatal. In this world, the Empire's human resources haven't dried up as yet. But the phrase, haven't dried up yet, applies only to the present. It's not a guarantee for the future. Still, that's assuming events here match what happened during World War II in our timeline. In the First World War that I remember, Germany won in the East, managing to push the lines forward. To be frank, the Empire is winning in the West at the moment. That doesn't mean we have to lose in the East, though. Same as before, it's not obvious which way this battle shall go. Objectively speaking, we still have a definitive chance at victory. Of course, we could well lose as well. I suppose I have to admit that I simply don't know. True, we can say. Well, that's how war is, and leave it at that. But I really don't like this uncertain outlook. The fog of war is an apt turn of phrase, indeed. The wise men who came before me must have really cursed this fog. Still, it'd be nice if I could see through it. It is only natural to want to know what lies ahead on the path you're walking, right? What's at the end of this dark tunnel? Apparently, a funny tale they tell in this communist country says that beyond the darkness lie hopes and dreams. Tanya can only answer with a sigh. Sadly, here in the East, the answer is always the same. Believing in hopes and dreams, you go through the tunnel and just find snowy country. If this were some atmospheric work of literature, it would surely be a delightful discovery. But reality isn't so beautiful. Works of art often smooth over imperfections. In real life, there is no fantastic scenery to behold, only muddy, snowy country. That is the morass the Imperial Army unconsciously dives into. It's a truly unpleasant sight. If we knew the way forward, we wouldn't have to suffer so much. We are so in the dark that it's hard to know what to expect. How dreadful. Oh, I guess we're almost at the stop. Surprising that they built one in the middle of the massive Eastern Front. The railroad department is doing quite a thorough job. Marveling at the sound marking their deceleration and the high-pitched whistle, Tanya picks up the newspaper and starts reading again. Perhaps due to the current war, the quality of the paper seems awfully low, but it's still not as bad as the content. Setting aside politics and society, Tanya notices that even the culture section of the paper is focused on raising morale via a feature on charity concerts. Having the people come together and sing patriotic songs probably isn't a bad way to increase their sense of belonging to the group. But, it should probably be said, I'd like to see actual concerts continue, too. This is why foreign media bitingly covers quote-unquote concerts in the empire and reports that they are patriotic conventions rather than places to appreciate music. I'm not in a position to comment on cultural policy, but... what's this? Right before Tanya sinks back into her thoughts, a precise knock sounds on the door. First Lieutenant Serebryakov, requesting permission to enter, ma'am. That's fine. Come in, Lieutenant. Excuse me, Colonel. We've received word from the home country via the station. Lieutenant Serebryakov pops into the cabin with brisk movements. In her hand is one of the thick envelopes the General Staff tends to use for sealed mail. From the home country, eh? Yes, Colonel. It's from the General Staff, and someone who has just boarded the train is here to see you as well. Someone here? To see me? Well, that's no way to greet an old classmate, Colonel von Degrichoff. Tanya is about to open the envelope when the familiar voice makes its way inside. Realizing whose it is, Tanya leaps to her feet. How nice to see an old face! The man stands in the entrance to the compartment with a smile to hide how utterly exhausted he is. I've come to bug you. You'll have to forgive me entering a lady's sleeping compartment. What a surprise! I never expected my esteemed colleague, Lieutenant Colonel Jager, to barge in on me. Don't you know there's an etiquette when visiting a woman's room? If your wife knew you had such bad manners, she would surely be disappointed. Oh dear, to think I would upset even my beloved wife and child. What a pesky business military duties are. But orders must be followed. I'll just have to curse my misfortune. We exchange friendly quips as we salute each other. But he was supposed to laugh boldly. Unfortunately, Colonel Jager doesn't seem to be equipped with a proper sense of humor. Perhaps he didn't serve enough time on the front lines. Colonel Jager isn't the type to banter or make jokes naturally, and it seems he missed out on the opportunity to cultivate better comedic sensibilities on the battlefield. I hope this will be enough compensation to have you pretend this never happened. Then Tanya realizes something strange and freezes. Has someone who was never the type to make jokes picked up a sense of humor? Even if it's a lousy one. That's not a good sign at all. Both Colonel Jager and I are straight-laced types. Even if I don't know him well enough to make declarations about his character, I am confident that he's not the type to make jokes. The officers selected for War College are either idiosyncratic or sincere like me. Both Jager and I are on the serious, hard-working side of that equation. I deviated from, or I guess you could say, acquired a sense of sarcasm from, my environment. A major factor was my harsh experiences on the forwardmost line. War can't be fought with a straight face, so I had to cultivate a sense of humor up there. But Colonel Jager shouldn't have had the same need. This is extremely uncharacteristic of him. Why is he trying to joke around anyway? His eyes seem to be smiling, but they're not. What's this? Arabica coffee I received from an officer's station down south. I figured it's hard to get any on the front lines, so I stuffed 2 kilos worth in my staff pack. By the way, I roasted 100 grams, and the rest I sealed up well in some bottles for you. Well, well, you have my thanks. Colonel Jager laughs as if it's nothing, and hands the pack to Lieutenant Serebriakov. Then he takes the seat opposite Tanya. So, he's even being considerate of the conditions soldiers face on the front lines. That's ideal for a general staff officer serving in the rear. But to be honest, Jager isn't the type to be comfortable mixing business and pleasure or personal errands like this. In other words, he's here to talk about something so bad that his conscience made an exception? I can't show it, but my mental state can be compared to how a bomb disposal technician feels when sent to the site of a huge explosive about to go off at any second. I thought that I would come visit my classmate for the first time in quite a while on the pretext of observing the front lines. When you're doing desk work for the general staff, you start to pine for chances to get some fresh air. Well, commanding a Kampfgruppe is a pretty fun job that affords lots of discretion. I'm jealous, frankly. Seems like I'll be the only one whining about my personal problems. Lieutenant Colonel Jager, one of the few serious classmates I had among the monsters in the general staff, wants this to look like a private conversation? That has to mean he has something to discuss that he can't let other people hear. An unofficial message. That's a warning sign if ever there was one. Holy hell. He's going to bring up something massive. The higher-ups, who are always trying to shove extra work off on those out in the field, can rot. Ugh. Oh, there's nothing I can do about that, Colonel. I get to be out and about and do as I please. I'll have to lend you an ear then. Oh, Lieutenant Serebriakov, go grind some beans and make us a coffee. Do a thorough job, and please take your time. Understood, ma'am. I think it'll take a little while, yes, probably a half hour or so, but I'll prepare 2 cups of coffee for you as requested. I didn't think I put too much emphasis on that last bit. It's excellent that my adjutant picked up on that subtle cue. She performs a beautiful salute and politely takes her leave. I see her out and lock the compartment door. Okay then, says Tanya, returning at last to Colonel Jager. What are we actually going to talk about? Oh, nothing good. I never thought I'd have to say something like this to our own troops. Christ, it makes me sick. If you were old enough, I would have brought us a stiff drink. This straight-laced military man wants to drink on duty? Though the surprise she can't voice reverberates in her head, Tanya feigns calm and limits her reaction to merely cocking her head quizzically. Colonel, General von Zatour is concerned that this offensive is sprawling too much. He is especially opposed to expanding the combat front any farther. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? Tanya nods without thinking. Lieutenant General von Zatour's idea is actually a staunchly safe plan. If we are going to focus not on expansion, but on reorganizing our forces, we can focus on the work without tripping through the mud and snow. In order to operate in the swamp of the East, not to mention the fearsome cold, without getting stuck, preparation is essential. I can't say his comment is anything but logical. The problem is General von Rudersdorf's view on the matter. You mean the opinion of the operations division? When he answers yes, Tanya stiffens. It's fine for the guys in charge of actually planning operations to have their own ideas. But someone who prefers a flexible style of operation, like General von Rudersdorf, could become the seed for trouble, opposing a safe plan. And what is the general's view? The guys in operations are prioritizing time. Colonel Jager, do you mean to say they don't want to give our enemy any more breathing room? That's exactly right. They're anxious about giving the enemy time to reorganize. Colonel Jager lays out the logic of the Imperial Army General Staff's operations staffers. It's problematic, frankly, to be sure. But when I listen, it's as correct as Zatour's view. On lines of this scale, reorganizing units and tidying up positions is practically unavoidable. After all, a disorderly army scattered about the field loses much of its effective fighting power. On the other hand, a force that is reorganizing can't attack. The pressure we can rain down on the enemy would drop dramatically. In other words, if we stop to reorganize our lines, the Federation army will also get a grace period. Yes, if nothing else, time would be granted to all in equal measure. If that happens, our enemies will definitely reorganize as well. Essentially, it's a never-ending dilemma. Apparently, the guys in operations and General von Rudersdorf want to surround and annihilate the Federation's field army, even if this offensive seems impossible. That means, he says, looking out the window, and Tanya understands what the higher-ups are after, even if she doesn't want to. They want to resolve things as soon as possible, whatever the cost. You mean because winter is coming? It's still August, but it's the end of August. Even if we are prepared for September, it's highly improbable that we'll still have weather suitable for military operations by the end of October. Our time is limited, but it's not entirely hopeless. The higher-ups want to push for a massive envelopment using our army's mobility. The fact that Tanya doesn't scowl the moment she hears this, that alone is a feat of self-control. 1 month can be guaranteed, but not 2. It's absurd. A massive gamble. It's far too great a risk to attempt a major operation now of all times. If only she could criticize such a criticism, it would be like a huge weight lifted from her shoulders. But whether in the market economy or out on the battlefield, there is no chance of victory without taking risk. And what does the General Staff think we should do? Opinions are split. It would probably be rude to nod and say, "Of course they are." But it'd be good for Tanya to smile vaguely. People wouldn't be surprised to see her accurately forecast the General Staff's mood as sunny with a chance of explosions. The guys in operations are aggressively optimistic. They are saying that they still have time to engage in a battle to encircle and annihilate the enemy. They say they'll get it done if they have 2 months. But it's those 2 months that we're not so sure about. He continues. On the other hand, the Service Corps guys we are closer to are angry. Their general demeanor seems to be, "You really want to put our already fragile supply lines in danger?" As long as it isn't guaranteed that we'll have 2 months to conduct operations, the Service Corps seems to want us to take the remaining time to prepare for winter before snow makes that difficult. You make it all sound so arbitrary, Colonel Jager. Jager responds with a, perhaps because he's aware of that fact. Tanya doubles down on the discussion. Another thing to consider is that if we give the enemy time to reorganize, we may end up having to support the front in a prolonged fight, with weakened supply lines, no less. The Service Corps's plan entails risk, too. Theoretically, yes. But vexing as it is, the logic on both sides of the debate is sound. Well, he's quite right about that. That's what the root of the issue is, Tanya considers internally. Truthfully speaking, there are all too many occasions where people are required to pick the better of two lousy options. Maybe if we had perfect information, it would be different, but we can't know everything. We have to use what's on hand to reason out the best option. Considering how slow-moving our enemy is, the aggressive plan's chance of succeeding might be higher. If taken one thought at a time, Colonel Jager's gripes are logical. If the enemy can't use their time effectively, and if our side can use our time effectively, then there's a benefit to us reorganizing and building a stronger foundation. If, it's a parade of conditionals. Sheesh, there are too many unknowns in this venture. Colonel Jager, may I say something? He nods. Of course. Not that she's particularly happy to see it before she hits him with something that has been bugging her for some time. All I've heard is that our upcoming mission will be escorting the main army. I'd appreciate it if you could tell me how this debate in the General Staff affects us, specifically me and my men. It's impossible to think of getting transferred away from the front and receiving a visit from her old classmate are sheer coincidence. Reading too much into events will only lure me into concocting a ridiculous conspiracy theory. But it would be a lie to say there is nothing deliberate going on here. The general's opinions clash, but for better or worse, they are both pragmatists. They both detest empty theory. I agree. They are both soldiers who place importance on what's occurring on the actual battlefield. Which is why, I guess you could say, Colonel von Degrichath, I really feel for you. They don't want a clash of theories, but to have their ideas verified on the battlefield itself. Tanya almost tilts her head quizzically at the word verified. No, hold on. Verifying things on the battlefield would mean... Right as that thought comes, Colonel Jager continues, rapidly delivering the conclusion to her thought. To put it in extreme terms, they'll make their decision after reconnoitering the enemy army. And we should lodge a formal protest about how awfully leisurely they'll be about it. Where are we going to get the time for that? Unfortunately for you, whether we attack or defend, it will take time to prepare the troops, meaning there is time for a combat survey. Ugh. Her bad feelings about this begin ringing the alarm bells, but it's already too late. Their conclusion is simple. While supplies are being stockpiled, your Kampfgruppe will go check out the enemy. Recon in force? Not quite. It's a mission to defend a salient. Ugh. Tanya knows it's bad manners to glare at people. Still, Colonel Jager just told her that command wants to put her in a dangerous area intentionally, giving her plenty of reason for her gaze to bore into his eyes. There is one area where we have deliberately given the enemy time to regroup. We want you to engage them and get a feel for how powerful a force they have. In a nutshell, it's a probe. We want you to perform an experiment on a strategically unimportant piece of land that we've left for them on purpose. The brass wants us to be a coal mine canary that lets them gauge the dangers by seeing when we sing and when we can't anymore. We're even lower than guinea pigs, by God. This is a terribly rude question, but are you saying my unit has been ordered to go and die to ascertain which of the two generals is correct? Well, that's an awfully harsh way to put it, but yes. The General Staff's problems are the General Staff's problems. In other words, we General Staff officers have to solve them among ourselves. As far as Tanya knows, I suppose it should be said, General Staff officers, including Colonel Jager, have a sense of duty for their office that is, for better or worse, too strong. Noblesse oblige is the nice way to put it. Obligations of the elite is haughtier, but also honest. But a guy like Colonel Jager isn't the type to share that kind of thought out loud. That's what an elite should be like. A representative like Jager conveys his nobility through actions and deeds, not words. Yet he's talking about it in terms of General Staff officers? I can only assume that there's a huge landmine afoot. I beg your pardon, Colonel Jager, but the way you're talking, it sounds like perhaps something has happened. Yeah, it's classified, but oh, what the hell. I'm the one getting you involved in this, so I would say it's my moral responsibility to inform you nonetheless. He looks up at the ceiling of the train compartment and doesn't even try to conceal his sigh. He must be in quite a state. Looking closely, I can see that the fatigue hasn't completely left his eyes. Most noticeable is his utterly exhausted tone. There was at least some life in that voice until just a moment ago. But it suddenly turned weary. Supreme High Command has been in an uproar for some time now. The government, the General Staff Office, and the court have all been a barrel of fun lately. He certainly doesn't sound like things over there have been very enjoyable. More like he's stopped caring. On top of that, we can't ignore public opinion for much longer. We're getting a storm of complaints from around the Empire. Everyone says we should just get it over with. It's no wonder there's a gigantic hurricane blowing through the General Staff office. Ugh. He groans and quietly adds, the voices calling for a swift resolution have grown to the point where we are feeling the pressure. And I can't say this publicly, but this augment between General von Zatour and General von Rudersdorf is an extension of domestic politics. Their positions and duties are simply too different. Mumbling that he's said too much, he turns to the window and clams up. Tanya understands intimately how he feels, of course. I see. Public opinion. I was just reading that wartime newspaper full of rows upon rows of garbage stories with nothing else in it. The national mood is a monster, and it appears to be growing more insistent by the second. I don't know who planted the seeds, but since they weren't harvested, this is the obvious result. It would seem that the more decent a person is, the harder their life becomes. Well, it has to be better than the front lines. I want to work in the rear, just like Colonel Jager, of course. At the same time, I realize it's not easy. For example, General von Zatour is in charge of the Service Corps. Put in extreme terms, the person in charge of acquiring resources for the war effort domestically is compelled to face a never-ending stream of problems. From the perspective of private demand, the Empire is pouring its limited resources into the bottomless pit of war known as the Eastern Front, and at a horrifying rate that is probably difficult to comprehend for people outside of the military. The way things are going currently, the discontent of all the civilian sectors that are getting the short end of the stick must be incredible. No, it's impossible to even imagine. Reading just one of these ridiculous newspaper articles makes it plain to see before God and man. It's too dangerous to have the person writing news articles so out of sync with the actual situation on the battlefield. Being intentionally vague to protect military secrets is only sensible. But if the people disseminating information simply don't know anything to begin with, we have some serious work to do when it comes to following best practices in communication and conveying intel to the populace. We're just like an underperforming corporation. We're one step away from that classic vicious cycle of savagery and emotionally fueled blunders. Colonel Jager, I've received the orders, and my unit will follow them. To the writ. We will head to our new location and conduct combat missions. All right, then. Well, saying sorry to cause you trouble would be insensitive even coming from me, Colonel. Colonel, I can't guarantee any additional supplies, but as your former classmate, I can say this much. I shall do everything in my power to maintain the supply lines for you. I swear it. For as long as I can. The person bowing, openly relying on Tanya, is a mid-level general staff officer in charge of handling supplies. Normally, he would be able to make anything happen if it was necessary for the war effort. Yet the most he can promise is to keep the lines open? Have things really gotten that bad? They really have. I'm sorry. I want to groan at the ceiling. Ugh. The situation is dire. A lieutenant colonel in the general staff working directly with the railroads department and logistics can't secure extra supplies for the Salamander Kampfgruppe, a single unit that's deploying on orders straight from the general staff. He can promise only the existence of some limited supplies for a while. This isn't a brigade or an army, but a mere Kampfgruppe pulled together from a hodgepodge of forces. The protest rising up in Tanya's throat is not incorrect. But the suffering in Colonel Jager's grimace, nothing else could more accurately convey the true feelings of those stationed in the rear. This must be why General von Satur is vehemently opposed to the expansion of the front lines no matter what. More importantly, he can't possibly divert any more national resources for military use. Tanya empathizes with his struggle so much that she feels sick. It's almost extremely frustrating that, paradoxically, she can understand why General von Rudersdorf and his men propose a swift resolution. The commanders aren't wrong when they say the campaign on the Eastern Front, where vast quantities of resources are being exhausted, needs to wrap up as soon as humanly possible. Even if you don't want to be conscious of your relationship with Supreme High Command and its demand for quick victories, if you work in operations, you have to be. Resources are finite. That's why we must stop using them. But the necessary resources have already dried up. Both generals are right, which is why it's such a frustrating issue. What a morass we've fallen into, I mumble, in spite of myself. I'm seized by the urge to cradle my head in my hands and scream. And Colonel Jager, who left with a wordless nod, must have understood intimately how I felt. How on earth did this happen? New scene here. August 30th, Unified Year 1926. The salient on the Eastern Front. And so, if we're going to tell this story in a somewhat logical order, the Salamander Kampfgruppe, under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Tanya von Degrichow, has safely deployed to a little salient no one but historians will ever take any interest in. The unit has non-standard combat capabilities for its size, but it should probably be clearly stated. Though it boasts armored vehicles, self-propelled artillery, and an outstanding aerial mage unit, it is still a Kampfgruppe by nature. A force that was thrown together on very short notice. When it comes to securing a bulge indefinitely, this Kampfgruppe, with its limited infantry strength, is destined to fail. It's the same dilemma. Though they are defending a base, Tanya is compelled by necessity to opt for an aggressive mobile battle. They don't have enough men to only play defense. Not that they have any extra hands for attacking and securing strategic locations either. If we leave some troops each time we seize a new position, we'll end up completely spread out. Splitting up is out of the question when the front is already so massive. We can't let our already slim forces get picked off unit by unit. The Imperial Army's experience on the Eastern Front is perfectly represented in miniature right here. Our experiment might as well be called Operation Canary. Of course, officially, it's research into the usage of Kampfgruppe for base defense tactics in combat, a plausible excuse, though not a good ruse, even so. It's so bloody unproductive, but apparently the General Staff must run an experiment on holding a massive front with a limited number of troops. And that's why we're still out here killing one another. In the history books, the lull on the main lines will be depicted as a stationary period, but that has nothing to do with us. And certainly, if neither the Empire nor the Federation is carrying out corpse-size operations, then it's correct in a big-picture way to say that it's all quiet on the Eastern Front. That there is a play on words for All Quiet on the Western Front, the novel. But that's not quite right, she mentally adds with a sigh. Just because a battle wasn't worth covering in a textbook didn't mean it was all nice and clean. Start the mop-up and make sure to get the rest of them, by God. Be careful. The commanders barking orders all have their guns at the ready, vigilantly searching. They're not out enjoying the autumn season, but stabbing freshly harvested bales of hay with their bayonets and checking houses for hiding enemy soldiers. Will this moment make it into the history books? Here's one. Don't let him get away. Grab him. We'll make him give up the names of everyone he was working with. After a few shouts back and forth, as well as some curses, I hear several gunshots and then silence. Sounds like they didn't manage to take him alive. A pity. I told them to capture enemies because we want to gather intelligence, but I guess for the troops of my Kampfgruppe, taking an opponent alive in a life-and-death battle is a pretty tall order. Or perhaps the first issue to complain about is how our enemies aren't people we can take prisoner. Most of the enemies we encounter are irregular militia, which I'm so familiar with that I'm sick of them. Since they aren't officially soldiers, they have no legal rights to be taken prisoner. According to the laws governing war, these bands of riffraff and rabble who don't make their alliances clear don't have the right of belligerence. Of course, I wonder how effectively enforced the laws of war are. Still, having a good chance of being killed and definitely being killed are two different things entirely. If your opponent knows death is certain, that makes their counterattack ever more desperate. That is what Sun Tzu said, did he not? There's something wrong with the status quo of kill or be killed, but the fact that we can't do anything about it makes it all the worse. It's sad, really, but it's only one part of this war of attrition. At this rate, our troops really will melt away out here. Ugh. Tanya grumbles as she glances around like a vigilant commander should. And off in front of her, she witnesses her men swinging shovels down on the body of an enemy soldier to make sure he's dead. Even the ones who hesitated when they first arrived on the Eastern Front are now merciless servants of efficiency and absolute certainty. When Tanya forced them through the experience of gruesome, irregular warfare, they adapted in no time at all. It's been only 2 days since we were stationed on the salient. The troops are more comfortable now with the shift from tidy battles fought between regular military forces to the muck of unconventional warfare. Or perhaps we should get philosophical and say they were forced to change? Because we have to is a phrase that causes abrupt transformations in humans. I mean, not a day goes by that we don't get attacked. Federation commando units started becoming very active right as we took up our positions. The prospects for this cleanup operation are awfully gloomy. The Salamander Kampfgruppe was originally formed to fight mobile battles. We're not at all suited to this sort of counterinsurgency mission. To speak in extremes, it's like sending cavalry to take on a fortress. Colonel, we finished eliminating them. Were there any enemy mages? Not that we saw, ma'am. I think it was mainly a guerrilla force made up of enemy militia. Tanya nods to convey her understanding. Inside, she feels like things are not going so well. If it were regular forces against regular forces, they would be ready any time. At least, her Salamander Kampfgruppe can kick the living shit out of any equally sized Federation unit with no problem. But Tanya's frustration lies elsewhere. Really, all that her unit should be used for is kicking ass. They don't have the manpower to secure an area by combing it for resistance fighters and plucking each partisan out. There isn't enough infantry. Failure is virtually inescapable. We have to avoid this swamp at all costs. But how? Even the General Staff is still looking for the answer. This is what you call answering your own question. Tanya, no, even the other staff officers are intimately aware of the issue. Everyone understands where the problem lies, but figuring out what to prescribe for it is proving quite difficult. Taking time to organize their thoughts would be a profligate luxury. You can't simply take your time in a guerrilla fight, because any visitors you receive will be sudden. The transmissions that come to us never take our schedule into consideration. Salamander 05 to 01. A new enemy has shown up. First Lieutenant Grants, who I have on guard, delivers a report that contains the word enemy. Those 5 little letters force my brain to change gears. To protect my peace-loving self's personal safety, I have to be fully prepared to face the enemy threatening it. Unverified hostile mage unit approaching from the northeast. There are 4 of them, and I guess they're flying NOE? Editor's note. Nap of the Earth, abbreviated NOE, is a type of very low-altitude flight course used by military aircraft to avoid enemy detection and attack in a high-threat environment. During NOE flight, geographical features are used as cover, exploiting valleys and folds in the terrain by flying in rather than over them. Continuing now. Unverified hostile mage unit approaching from the northeast. There are 4 of them, and I guess they're flying NOE? Salamander 01, copy 05, nice work. Those must be their hotshots. I'll head over there myself, so if you're racking up points, I'll hope you'll leave me some to share. My Kampfgruppe is spreading out, sweeping for any remaining enemies. They must have been aiming for this. They waited until my troops committed their attention to the ground battle to send aerial mages on a hit-and-run strike force out of the sky. It's a textbook approach, rigidly faithful to theory. That's how I know it's their main objective. For better or worse, it's easy to understand. Oh, Tanya continues, as if she had forgotten to mention something. I wanted to warn you, 05. Make sure your reports are accurate. Are they flying NOE or not? 05 to 01, apologies, but it's less like they're flying and more like they're trying to imitate ducks in the air. 01 to 05. Now you're talking. Ducks? I wonder what he might mean as I fly. Increasing my altitude, I take out my binoculars and begin scanning the direction Lieutenant Grants said the enemy is coming in from. Yes, ducks! It would be easiest for you to just see them yourself, but the way they're moving is not so much contour flight as it is level flight. We can aim at them from our position right now. How should I explain this? It's like they have their hands full simply flying, so they forgot to keep an eye out for threats above them. Ah, I spotted them. Fine, do it. When I finally see it for myself, I understand that Lieutenant Grants' description is apt. Through my binoculars, I see unsteady Federation mages struggling to maintain their erratic path through the air. I'd be hard-pressed to call them aerial mages at all if that's the state they're in. They aren't flying through the sky so much as drowning in it. I never thought we'd encounter an enemy who can barely stay in the air. Back on the Rhine front, I would have thought any mages seeming so preoccupied by basic flight were a ruse. I might have shouted back at Grants, "Take a closer look, damn it!" At least, I never would have imagined that these 4 mages were the enemy's main attacking force. I would have thought it was a harassment attack to dull our edge before a major offensive, or possibly a simple feint. Both the Rhine front and the Eastern front feature cheap trick after cheap trick, so the fog of war is thick as ever. But on the Eastern front, the rules are quite a bit different too, it seems. The enemy is waiting for the Imperial Army to exhaust itself and collapse. I mean, come on, thinks Tanya, while looking up at the company flying above her. Being on guard against enemy approaches and maintaining company-strength forces in the air as cover 24 hours a day is tiring. And after all that effort, our opponents are 4 enemy mages who can barely fly? The defending side can't know when or from where the enemy will appear. But there's not anything we can do about that. This'll be rough. Without a doubt. But our respective attrition rates are very different. We've done a great job so far, so I'm sure we'll be able to keep it up. Tanya breaks into a smile at Major Weiss's comments. Then, as if to back up that confident declaration, the troops who had gone out to attack unleashed a company's worth of disciplined fire. Lieutenant Grants was in command. Now, let's see how skilled they are. Tanya wonders what would happen if they missed, but she doesn't consider it a necessary worry. She's been with these men since the Rhine, after all. I'm not so thick-headed that I'm oblivious to the improvement of my subordinates. Even Grants, who used to always make me worry, has made significant progress. War is a lousy experience, but live combat does make a person grow. The men and officers under me who have gained experience, endured trials, and put their abilities on display are true assets. I invested in Grants' human capital and trained him up myself. Now his skill is worthy of being praised as professional. He discovered this pseudo-NOE flying platoon at what was something approaching ultra-long range, then shot them down from a considerable distance. Marvelous. Simply marvelous. All threats are confirmed down. New recruits, who I initially find to not be of much use, rapidly gain experience in the field, and their abilities blossom. Even if it's difficult to call the skills involved in waging war productive, quote-unquote, I still have to hand it to them for their earnest attitude towards getting better at their jobs. That's 4 joint scores. At this rate, nothing will remain of the current named system by the end of the fighting on the Eastern Front. I mean, the way things are going, We'll be mass-producing names. That being said, I doubt the alias White Silver will ever be overshadowed. I wonder. I can't say this to Vice, but his comments assume that the Empire wins the war. From his perspective, perhaps that's accurate. But Tanya has to wince at her own position. Maybe other people can believe firmly in the Empire's victory, holding faith like an innocent maiden in love. But she is different. Tanya gazes into the clear blue sky and sighs. 100 or 1,000 years ago, or 100 or 1,000 years from now, the sky probably has and always will be the same. A universal constant of nature, staying ever as it is. I'm so envious of the sky. Though it's uncertain whether the Empire will be around for 1,000 years or not, the sky will abide at its leisure. Will the Empire still exist after the fighting on the Eastern Front ends? Will the 1,000-year Reich reign supreme? That is where Tanya's true worries lie, so of course she is apt to look up in envy. I don't want to pity myself, but what a miserable situation I'm in. Still, I should prioritize the work in front of me over my existential woes. Salamander 01 to all units. It seems like the fighting has cooled down. Begin recovering our injured and searching for enemies to take prisoner. The army's work isn't done just because it repelled the enemy attack. It's more like a party, in that cleaning up afterward is the hardest part. If you can't feel lucky for having to worry about cleaning up, you can't keep going. Regrets and reflections are privileges of the living. If you die, there's nothing. 2nd Company, stand by for rapid response. 3rd and 4th Companies, keep patrolling the warning line. I'm putting 02 in command of the warning line. 02, Roger. Leave it to me. Great.